Good evening, and thanks for tuning in. President Bush addressed the nation tonight and urged Americans to support his administration's $700 billion financial bailout plan. The president did not say why he waited so long to address the country on the financial crisis that's shaken Wall Street to its core, but he warned in very stark language that the consequences of not passing the plan would be dire.
More banks could fail, including some in your community. The stock market would drop even more, which would reduce the value of your retirement account. The value of your home could plummet. Foreclosures would rise dramatically. And if you own a business or a farm, you would find it harder and more expensive to get credit. And ultimately, our country could experience a long and painful recession.
The president spoke shortly after he invited Senators Obama and McCain and the congressional leadership to the White House tomorrow for an extraordinary summit to pass a bipartisan deal. Right after the president's speech, I spoke with Senator Chris Dodd, chairman of the Senate Banking Committee, about the likelihood of passing this bailout bill.
Turning over $700 billion when we're going to have a change of administration in 40 days, basically, is something I'd like to see something done with this money that would require some check on this to determine whether or not this plan of theirs is working. I've talked to a lot of people on Wall Street who spent their careers there who have serious reservations about this particular proposal. Now, Congress ought not try to micromanage that, but I'm not convinced this plan is going to work, and a lot of people who are far more knowledgeable about the workings of these financial institutions are not either. So I'd like to be able to have some point here fairly quickly that we make a determination as to whether or not this proposal, if he's given the authority, will actually work.
I also asked Senator Dodd about the bleak prognosis that Senator McCain gave the bailout plan earlier today when he announced his decision to suspend his presidential campaign and return to Washington to work on compromise legislation.
I'm delighted that John is expressing himself on the issue. I've heard from Barack Obama on numerous occasions over the last number of days, calling. I know he's talked to Hank Paulson, and so he's been deeply involved and interested in how this is progressing. I've never heard from John McCain on the issue, so I'm delighted he's expressing some interest. And I'm a little concerned that while we're meeting, in fact, tomorrow morning at 10 a.m., Republicans and Democrats in the House and the Senate are sitting down to try and finalize some of these particular points. We had a long meeting today in the Democratic caucus in the Senate, and I'm just worried a little bit that sort of politicizing this problem, sort of, flying in here, I'm beginning to think this is more about a rescue plan for John McCain than a rescue plan for the economy. So we're going to meet tomorrow apparently at the White House late in the afternoon, but candidly, a lot of us have been working for 5 straight days around the clock, and I haven't heard a word from John McCain.
Senator Dodd's House counterpart, Representative Barney Frank, is apparently much more optimistic about the bailout legislation's future. He said today, quote, "We now have between House and Senate Democrats an agreement on what we think should be in the bill. We have a meeting scheduled at 10 a.m. tomorrow to meet with the Republicans." Also today on CNBC, Barney Frank told Aaron Burnett, quote, "Earlier today, it became clear to me we would get the votes to pass this bill." And of course, this great $700 billion debate played out in front of a backdrop of some very high-stakes election drama. John McCain said he was suspending his campaign as of tomorrow morning for the good of the economy. Then he suggested postponing Friday's foreign policy debate with Barack Obama, also for the good of the economy. And apparently there was some sort of phone tree going on. Obama called McCain, McCain called Obama, then Bush called Obama. So what's the impact of tonight's speech on reaching a deal? Did today's news and moves hit the presidential race like a rubber mallet hitting your knee at the doctor's office? Joining us now, Lawrence O'Donnell, MSNBC political analyst and former chief of staff on the Senate Finance Committee. Hi, Lawrence. Nice to see you.
Good to be here, Rachel.
When Chris Dodd spoke out there about the possible politicization of the bailout plan, is that already done? Is that politicization already a fait accompli?
Well, there's a lot of politics in it already, but McCain obviously wasn't helpful. And now, it's pretty astonishing to me. I just learned on your show that you have talked to the chairman of the Senate Banking Committee as much as John McCain has on this subject. Chris Dodd is saying McCain has spoken to me once. Now, Chris Dodd owns this issue in the Senate. He's the chairman of the committee. Nothing can happen that he doesn't want to happen. McCain is not even on the committee. John Tester, freshman senator from Montana, is more powerful than John McCain on this issue because at least he's on the committee. And that's where this work gets done. What I'm hearing from Barney Frank and from Chris Dodd indicates that we're probably a couple of days away from final passage of this.
And is it possible that the return to Washington by John McCain, the sort of holding the presidential debate hostage to the idea of a deal passing, is that actually conceivably making it less likely that a deal will pass?
A little less likely, but the people involved are so professional that the McCain thing is just going to be a little bit of a fly that they have to swat away. I mean, what's going to be very strange about McCain's return to Washington is we now know what he's going to do for an hour tomorrow. He's going to go to the White House. The president has saved him in terms of his schedule for tomorrow, because here was a guy who was showing up in Washington with nothing to do. I mean, literally nothing to do involving this problem.
Right. Yeah.
All of this work gets done behind closed doors, and he's not allowed in that room. And so the president said, all right, I want Obama and McCain and the leadership to come down to the White House for what will basically be a photo op. Whenever you have a meeting that big, there is no business conducted. I've been in those meetings in the White House. They're meaningless. And everyone who's in them is eager to get back to their committee rooms to get the real work done, which is where it's going to happen.
Where does dissent matter at this point? We have seen some division within the Republican caucus in terms of whether or not bailouts in general are a good idea, whether these circumstances are extreme enough to warrant a bailout, even if they don't like the idea generally. There's some division, more minor on the Democratic side than on the Republican side, about what would be the appropriate conditions to put on this bailout. When does dissent matter? When could it potentially change the bill? And in terms of what the next steps are from your time in the Senate, are those concerns material at this point, or is it just rhetorical?
They really do have to be managed very carefully. There's dissent that's philosophical, that's genuine. Then there is dissent that is purely political. I'm a Republican. I'm in a swing district. I don't really want to vote for this thing. The thing that I would like to do is vote against it, say it looks like it's too much money, and then run against it in November. That's what I'd really like to do if I'm a Republican. The Democrats know that, and the Democratic chairman of those committees know it, and they will not bring this to a vote on the floor of the House or on the floor of the Senate until they have been assured privately from the Republican side that there will be enough Republican votes on this. That's where the president comes in with his party. He's unfortunately very weak at this time to influence his party. That's where Hank Paulson has to influence the Republicans. But also, there is a theoretical role there for John McCain. The problem there is he doesn't have any real followers in the Senate or in the House. He's never been popular in terms of his ability to move legislation and get people to get on board with him. But the Democrats will not pass this on Democratic votes alone. They will need the political cover of the other party. We're going to spend a minimum of 24 hours in this process toward the end on nothing but how many Democratic votes and how many Republican votes to get this thing passed. They'll be able to pass it, but they just need exactly the right ratio so each party can prevent the other from attacking over this in November.
And it brings us once again, as we have come down to so many times in the last 17 months, 21 months that we've been doing this campaign, between the difference between governing and campaigning. We've got 2 United States senators who are vying for the presidency. And as you say, John McCain doesn't have very many governing allies in the Republican caucus in the Senate. It doesn't have all that many friends, particularly on an issue like this. That said, Republican Party unity, their interest in seeing a Republican in the White House may pry loose some support, some potential moves in his favor if he tries to make presidential political hay out of this bill. And I would have thought before today's actions that this was going to be handled as an issue of governing. For McCain to say he won't go to the debate unless X happens on this bailout bill, for him to say he's going back to Washington to work on this bailout bill and he's suspending his campaign, those are such dramatic moves. I can't help but think that concerns of governing have now been sublimated to the campaign on this.
Well, and it's not going to work, because the simple question is, what are you going to see John McCain doing on C-SPAN at 9 o'clock on Friday night instead of debating the future of this country? I just don't think it's going to work out for him. I think he's going to have to take his White House meeting as enough of he's done enough in Washington, and then get himself down to Mississippi on Friday, because I don't think the debate commission is going to go his way on this, and I think it starts to look frantic. It looks like he can't debate because of this. Well, we're in a war on terror, if I'm listening to John McCain accurately. Now, that means that every single day where you're going to have a debate, we're in the middle of a war on terror, we're in the middle of a war in Afghanistan, a war in Iraq. plenty of things can happen, and the debate commission knows this. Plenty of things can happen between now and the schedule of all the other debates that could give you reason to cancel debates, if this is a reason to cancel debates. So the debate commission, I think, is going to hold very strong to this.
He always has the option, of course, if he thinks it's so important for him and Senator Obama to both be in Washington, to have Governor Palin and Senator Biden do their debate this Friday.
Step right up.
I'm sure that's being considered, right?
Right.
MSNBC political analyst Lawrence O'Donnell, it's great to see you. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Rachel.